What I thought we could do today for the inquiry is really to look at, kind of summarize some of the things that we've already done around this inquiry, but also to do it kind of in a fresh way as well. How can we go back to something and go more deeply? Being in relationship and community is something that's so important to us here. And so many of us, as we're working with this, have really come to a deep appreciation for being in community with each other. That we can listen and really practice that skill of being here for each other and connecting with each other. This statement of his, the connection to each other, not only feels good, it also creates good. We can really see that in our community here. As we're doing this, we benefit for sure. And we also have the experience of bringing other people in the breakout rooms. Sometimes there will be people there who've been coming for a long time, 3 or 4 people everyone's experienced. And sometimes there will be people who are new to us as a community and maybe new to the practice as well, the somatic inquiry. We have kind of a community vibe of being kind, being present. We have a relationship with each other. When he says, don't shy away from the suffering of others, compassion reminds us of our shared non negotiable pain of being human. That's something that we experience together. So, whether we're doing a practice like Tonglen, going into compassion for ourselves, cultivating that in ourselves, and being present with that with each other is a wonderful way to fill our own cup. So, we might think that extending compassion isn't a direct way to do that. In fact, it's often a more direct way. We need to be centered in ourselves and then also really reaching out to other people. Radical friendliness. If we're liberated enough from our conditioning and the delusion that we're separate to view all of its people with love. And this is a hard reach for many of us. Humanity is hard. There are a lot of people who are doing things that we find appalling or scary. And that can be a grumpy neighbor, it can be things that are happening on the world stage. So, this concept of people do not need to be perfect or to our liking or without complication to be deserving of love. And then he's always bringing it back to how can we recognize other people as full human beings? So much of what happens when we're feeling threatened by somebody is we objectify them in a way. We make them kind of mono-dimensional instead of fully complex people. One of the ways that we can work with that is to remind ourselves that this is a person who has a specific life. They have reasons why they think the way they do. They have experiences that have been traumatic. They've experienced joy. They've had all kinds of human experiences, just like we have. So, one of the reasons that we would do that is in order to connect better or from a deeper place with people, but also to make more space for ourselves. So many times as a trauma response, we have this perfectionism of, I can only love myself if I'm perfect. People shame themselves with the inner critic. And it's not true that we can only love ourselves if we're perfect, because of course, then we would never love ourselves. So people have good parts, annoying parts, and parts that we don't know. So that's another really important piece of this is that we judge people by their behavior and by their interactions with us. And in fact, there's a lot of deeper elements that we might not be aware of on the surface. The annoying parts make it hard for us to relax and soften enough to be present with people. Just as we hopefully love ourselves, even though we're not perfect, we can lean into this practice of loving complicated people. And it's not a practice of letting go of boundaries. It's a practice of perhaps having stronger boundaries, being real. Instead of going into a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn strategy with people, we can be more grounded. We can let them know that we see them, that their experience matters, and we see them for who they are. That's actually the most powerful way to help them recognize their own fundamental goodness, but also our own. So let's pause here and do a bit of an inquiry. Bring someone to mind who's complicated, maybe a little bit difficult. Bring them to mind and let yourself settle into that. You might see their face or have a memory. And if you were to say in your heart and in your mouth, maybe too, you could say the words out loud if you want. I accept you just as you are. It does not mean I like that. It doesn't mean I approve of that. It just means I accept that you are as you are. I accept that this is how you feel. This is how you think. And as you are doing that, let yourself notice, what does that feel like in your body, in your mind? What are the thoughts? Part of you is probably going, no, that's not okay. We're doing a practice. We know that theoretically, at least, it would be good if we could accept other people's reality. When we're doing a practice like this, what we're doing is bringing forward, what is our resistance to that? What's in the way of truly in our heart acknowledging somebody as the truth of who they are? So in one way, we're looking at behavior, in another way, we're going deeper than behavior. We know from our own experience with trauma that a lot of times we're not behaving as our best self. That's true with other people as well. And if you're working with somebody or you're in a relationship with somebody who has a fight response and you tend to go into a freeze, or maybe you tend to go into a fight response and you're frustrated that the other person isn't engaging because they're in freeze. There's a lot of different ways this could be. What is it that you might have to work with or cultivate accepting about that other person? I accept that this is how you are. Stay aware that you're here in this moment doing practice. And then let's set that aside for a moment. And whatever it is that you were noticing, sometimes we get really heated. Some feelings can have kind of an inflammatory or fiery texture. One of the points that Sah's making in his book is when we experience feelings that feel like they could consume us, especially if we don't have access to our center, then we tighten up against that. So we probably all experienced a wide range with this. Sometimes we're pretty grounded. We might have strong feelings going on, anger, grief, something else, and we're still able to stay pretty present with it. We're aware of our body, our breath. We're not defending ourselves by escaping. We're really here. So having access to that, this is really hard. I just noticed I'm holding my breath. I could take a few deeper breaths, or I could hold my own hand. So I can tolerate this emotional discomfort. I can tolerate the sensations, the energy. And how could I help myself do that? When we have these intense feelings in the body, it's natural for us to go into some kind of a response. Fight, flight, freeze, or fawn is often what we do. Staying in the present is where we can shift that, where we can transform that. One of the reasons that we do that on our own as a practice is so that we can have that steadiness when we actually are in a conversation with that difficult person. Because there's things going on, there's things being said, there's lots going on when we're in relationship. One of the ways that we can slow that down is to do an inquiry like this. A few weeks ago, we did a practice of radical compassion, a practice of Tonglen. And we can do that practice of bringing in pain and breathing out some kind of relief. And that's a big practice when we do it for other people. So I thought maybe today, since this is a bit of a shorter inquiry, that we could do that for our own pain of being in a situation. Maybe it's the pain of being around somebody or loving someone or having them in our life who's complicated and we don't feel very safe around them. Maybe it's someone that we really care about and love, and they're really off kilter right now. But what does that do inside of us? We're having a hard time accepting them as they are. We saw that a lot during COVID as well. people were just too dysregulated, and we got into big fights with family and friends about vaccines and all kinds of things, whether COVID was even a real virus. We all have these experiences. So, whatever comes to mind for you right now, see if you could breathe that in as like a sooty, dark cloud. We're not breathing it into our lungs, we're breathing it into the area around our heart. And then meeting that dark feeling, the pain, that suffering with compassion. If you were to think about your heart as full of light, as a space that's full of light and compassion and warmth, and then you're breathing in, voluntarily breathing in your own pain and suffering, and then let your compassion flow out as a river of light. Let's do this for a few minutes. See what the experience is. So, breathing in that dark, sooty pain, the feelings, let that come into the area around your heart. And then let it be transformed by the light, the warmth, the compassion. If you want, you could have your hand on your heart. Notice if you're hooked on something, if you're ruminating about something or thinking about something that might happen in the future, and let yourself come into this as less of a thinking process and more as a somatic kind of an image of letting that pain come in and be transformed by the light, the compassion, the warmth in your heart. We all have difficulty with this at times. Maybe you're breathing in the pain of being closed hearted, of putting someone out of your heart. Stay present. Notice that we're doing a practice. And then let that go and rest just now in the warmth and the light of your heart center. Notice that we can do that as a practice. We can open ourselves to that for a few minutes, and then we can put a pause on that. We can come back into sitting in the light. But also notice what your experience was as you were doing that. Sometimes that's a little bit concerning that we might be bringing things into our heart area that we can't handle. And maybe your experience was that, no, I needed to back away from that a bit. That's fine. Or maybe your experience was, as soon as I remembered to breathe out that light, things really did soften. They got a little bit easier. Let's move into this shine a light on yourself. So much of what makes it hard for us is that we think we need to be at some level of goodness or good behavior or perfection in order to be worthy of love and connection. And that's not true. The Sah saying, no matter where you are on this journey, you are worthy of love and connection. And that we all have those feelings of separation, isolation, shame. We have things that are difficult for us to work with. That's part of the pain of being human. We don't know what's going to happen. We're not sure that it's going to be okay. Somebody might get sick. We might be connected with someone who's really going through a hard time. There might be violence or all kinds of hard things. Just on a basic human level, even if things are going fairly well, we still have death, illness, heartbreak, part of living. There's also the truth that we all want to be free. So let's do this little awareness practice here. I accept my inner goodness. And as we're doing these inquiries, they're not really affirmations. They're more like a reverse inquiry where we say something that we hope will be more true. And there's some kind of resistance to it. There's something that says, no, I don't quite believe that. So let's sit with that and bring it into the heart. I accept my inner goodness. My behavior is not who I am. So, if we're looking at why we don't accept that we are basically fundamentally good, it's often because we're shaming ourselves for some behavior. Behavior is something that we do, we can understand it. It's not who we are. And let that come into your heart. Let it come in on kind of a more non-verbal way. And you connect with your basic goodness, letting go of that idea that we need to be perfect. And if you bring to mind a friend, maybe someone who's easy to work with, someone who's a little bit easier to sense into their basic goodness. Or maybe that person you were working with before, the complicated one, is still kind of present. I accept my friend's inner goodness. And their behavior is not who they are deep down at our core. I accept their inner goodness, their basic goodness. And sometimes our mind will go into, well, yeah, but I can't let them in or they're going to. So this isn't about forgiveness. It's not about letting go of all of our boundaries and letting people in. It's about trying to keep an open heart, accepting that this person too has a life. They have reasons why they feel the way they do. The way they behave doesn't come out of the blue. There's some reasons for that. We might not like it. It might not be safe for us. But to see if we can just nudge ourselves below that level of their behavior and experiment with that idea. I accept my friend's basic goodness. You could come back to your own. I accept my own basic goodness. At my core, I know that I am basically good. Let yourself feel into that. And I cultivate open hearted joy and connection. Even when we notice that our hearts are getting hardened, we're putting someone out of our heart, we can let that be. We don't have to bring every person into our heart. If it's too hard right now, maybe we could just see about not putting them too far away. Maybe we could just kind of work with something that seems a bit more doable. And we could let them move completely off to the side, off stage. In my own heart, could I cultivate that joy, the connection? It's okay for me to focus on that for a while. And what would that feel like if that was all that was here? It's open hearted joy. And there might be something that comes to mind, an experience, a person, being out in nature. If you have your hand or hands on your heart, you might be feeling it for yourself. What's happening inside? I cultivate open hearted joy and connection. I believe in my own innate goodness. I know that to be true. Notice what's going on in your mind, in your heart. And we could acknowledge that this is deep inner work. Something that we can easily do is just completely let go of how we want things to be. And we also acknowledge that there's something very valuable in this practice of connecting with other people as though they are full human beings, which they are, and acknowledging that even if we might not like what they do or how they think or feel, that they also are another human being. And no matter where we are on this journey, we're worthy of love and connection, whether we have trouble accepting them or not. But this is all something that we can work with and open our hearts around.